Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soul Quest episode 54. It's been a while, and we're coming back with a bang because we have this amazing guest, Grant Hanson, that we're so excited to learn more about all that he's doing. And from Facebook, I can say, Grant, it seems like you are doing a lot. And it's amazing. It's amazing work. So we can't wait to just hear all about it. But let's kind of start with your childhood. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, so childhood, wow. I guess looking back now, because I've had to go back through my journey and do a lot of work, around my childhood. So it's been interesting taking a real look at my childhood over the last, several years. And so my childhood was how do I say it? I had really, really, great role models within my family, and we had a lot of dysfunction as well. You know what I mean? And so it was weird. I got a lot of great examples and some really bad examples. And so, I guess for a while I was confused about what normal was, as far as parenting goes. Because I remember just really early on realizing that, like, for instance, my parents and their siblings, right, all had their own ideas about how to raise kids. And there was always this sort of competition almost. I don't know if I call it a competition, but just this sort of judgment, right, about how they were all raising their kids. You know what I mean? And I remember just kind of feeling that tension, right? And us as cousins kind of knew that was happening a little bit and didn't affect us as much. But, I just remember obviously dealing with issues with my mother, and the alcoholism that ended up finally coming out and becoming kind of a big issue. And again, something I normalized for a large part of my childhood. There's a lot of functionality there, right? So it's not like we ever didn't have a place to live, or she didn't have a job or anything like that. She was a teacher. And so I was confused about how somebody could do those things and still lead this semi sort of normal life, right? And and so my childhood was I never wanted for anything or needed for anything, but I do feel like there was a degree, at least again with my mother, of trying to compensate materialistically, for the lack of emotional presence, emotional intelligence. Just, again, just a lot of things now, like looking back, right, I can see and realize, and it's not to talk down. It's I see a lot of, right, I empathize, and I get emotional when I talk about my mom like that, because I now know where it comes from. I know why she acted that way, and I empathize with her. It's not that I'm angry at her, at least not now. For a long time I was, but I guess having to go through my own trials and my own stuff, right, it gave me a whole nother perspective, right? And so I went through my own stuff, and our journeys look different, and I still care for her. She's lives in an independent living home not too far from here. And so, but then on my dad's side, because they were divorced when I was one, I had, there's a lot of love there, a lot of, still some dysfunction, but just I remember seeing very different characteristics on both sides of the family, right? When I would compare the two, spending time with the two different sides, going to this grandparents versus that grandparents, and what morals and values were important over here versus what was important over here, and sort of this, they didn't, I don't think, realize they were doing it to us as kids, but there was this, again, sort of competition a little bit, and so I guess it started this journey of me very early on, I don't know, trying to develop critical thinking skills, you know what I mean? Like just trying to figure out what was what for myself, from everything from religious beliefs to, did that happen?
What?
All right. So yeah, no, anyways, just, just going back to that conversation, and it was just kind of, I guess, again, early on, and it's hard to look back now and realize or figure out when I started to realize this, but trying to, or almost seeing how the progression of, like, from how the belief systems would be passed down, right? How how these ideas about what's important and what's not important is passed down, and how, you know, at some point I think I just woke up and somebody else gave me permission, I guess, without realizing it, to actually challenge some of those ideas. You know what I mean? And I don't know, I guess for a period of time, maybe subconsciously, I didn't think that I could, you know, I just thought that things were I don't know, I just think that things were the way they were, you know, and it wasn't until a little bit later on that I guess, and I will combine that with somebody that I respected and that had credibility in my eyes. You know, like I certainly had people around me who had challenged authority and that kind of stuff. And I'm getting a little bit later in my childhood now, you know, but at a certain point, I just realized that, you know, I could kind of take what made sense to me and not necessarily take the rest, you know. And obviously that's a Cliff Notes version, right? There's a lot of great stuff in there. You know, don't let me fool you. I played baseball, I played sports, my family was there. It was always, people were there, family was around. I had all of that, right? There was all this dysfunction. I think the most traumatic part, and I'll wrap up with this. The most traumatic part was experiencing all those great parts of childhood, but then having all of this really not good stuff happening, like at home, and you know, causing me to get in trouble, and then having people not really believe me about it, or believe me and my sister, and or feeling like that stuff was normal. And I'd go to my friends' houses and they'd be very close with their parents, or I'd hear them maybe confide very personal information to their parents about something that they had gone through. And I remember multiple times being like, dude, you tell your mom stuff like that? And they'd be like, yeah, dude, I tell my mom everything. She's my best friend. And I'd be like,
Oh,
wow, like, what is that like? You know, and I guess if everything else in my life was falling apart, like we didn't have a place to live and like all that stuff, then it would have all, it would have all made sense. But the fact that like we had this sort of life where we didn't really need for much and all that, but then I experienced all those things, and I was kind of like, oh, well, be great, you know, be grateful. Like that stuff's not that big of a deal because look what all else you have, you know. And you know, I guess at a certain point, I just realized that wasn't cool. You know, that wasn't really the case. So
wow.
yeah.
So at what point did your mom, I mean, did she recover at some point?
You know, so she went to, I actually, this was long after I got, you know, clean and sober, and I went into the treatment industry professionally after she retired, which I had been calling. You know, I knew when she retired things would get worse, and they did. And you know, I put her in treatment a few times, and the last treatment episode was still a couple years ago at this point, and was the only treatment center in the country that I could even find that would take her with. She developed what's called Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is basically like alcohol-induced dementia, if you will, and it's sort of like wet brain. It's a thiamine deficiency that it can't get better, but you can prevent it from getting worse. I will say that she's not necessarily doing the things she has to do to prevent it from getting worse. You know, it's right now I'm doing all I can to just play damage control. I've got her in probably the best place I can have her right now, and I kind of oversee her situation, you know, and so, you know, to say that her situation has improved a bit, but only after it got worse, you know, first. So right now, this is probably what it's going to be for, you know, for the rest of her life, you know. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, you got a lot going on. So is she, so you ended up in an addict situation as well. Do you feel like that's stemmed from growing up with your mom?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It would, you know, it would be unreasonable to say that didn't contribute. It's just, you know, in the world of addiction, mental health treatment, it's just always kind of that chicken or the egg conversation, right? And there are definitely professionals. I watch. You should see my LinkedIn news feed. It's all these professionals arguing over like, you know, what causes what, and it's just, there's still a lot we don't agree on there, you know, as an industry, as a community, and so it's hard for me to say what all contributed to what, but yes, it definitely I would say maybe not as much to my actual addiction itself, more so to just the overall dysfunction I have displayed in previous relationships, right? My inability at times, even still to, I can still tell at times when I react based around something that from back then, you know what I mean? And it's still an ongoing process. So I'd say maybe less the addiction side of it and more honestly the mental health, side of it, and the way I handle conflict. There's been a lot of work I've had to do around that, way even after I got sober.
I see. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about that journey, getting sober, or how, tell us about that whole journey.
Yeah. Well, so I started, obviously in high school. It's kind of when things started to slope downhill, and first I describe it this way: it was fun, then it was fun with problems, then it was just problems. That's kind of how the progression went. How long each of those phases are is very case by case, but for me, luckily, and I say luckily, but because I got well much sooner, that was not a very long process. It went from one to the end very, very quickly. And so I started, having fun when I was a freshman, sophomore, drinking, smoking weed. Started taking, Xanax. When I found Xanax, I'll be honest with you, that was it. That was kind of like, wow, I want to feel like this literally every day for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And throughout my entire addiction, there was a lot. I certainly did lots of other things, right? I did pretty much everything you can think of. But I will say that and marijuana for sure were the two constants. It was like peas and carrots for me basically, and I got in lots of trouble around Xanax itself. But I ended up getting kicked out of high school my junior year, actually, around October, so right after my birthday, and because I ended up getting caught stealing some money out of some of the lockers in the football locker room, and got sent to treatment. That was kind of the agreement, right? They agreed not to press charges, the other students. And I went to treatment for the first time. And that's certainly when I was exposed, right? I always talk about that time being when the seed was planted, and I think there's a lesson there. And I obviously am not going to go down that rabbit trail, but it's very important to consider that when I'm talking to people now, when you know that somebody's just not ready to get the message, but you just know that you got to plant just plant the seed. You don't have to convert them right now, but just plant the seed, and that was what happened at that time for me. And I ended up leaving there. I went to sober living a little bit after that. It was out in Kerrville, Texas. And 2008-9, I was 17. And after I left sober living, I ended up relapsing very quickly, and I went back to Houston, kind of just not on the run, but I was homeless. I spent sleeping in parks, kind of couch hopping when I could. And it's wild to me looking back that I was doing that at 17 years old. I did not appreciate that at that time. I did not fully realize how crazy that was then. I do now. And again, went to treatment again the end of that year. This was 2009, and turned 18. And after that, same kind of pattern there, twisted off pretty quickly after. Tried to do it on my own, and within the next few years, things got pretty bad pretty quickly, especially when I caught my first charge. I got caught with cocaine. So it was only a little 6-month stint I did in state jail, but it led me to introductions, made connections for me, which, manifested into more trouble than I could ever imagine, and that's where I found methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is, ultimately what brought me down. My life was kind of just slowly going downhill. And then when I found methamphetamine and that lifestyle, it just nosedived, and thank God, because it took me down a rabbit trail that I needed to go down to get where I'm at, and I see people take their whole lives to get there. And I'm so grateful that wasn't me. So I didn't actually go back to try. I ended up in prison again for a second time, 2013 to 14, a little over a year. And, after that, I had a moment, and a lot of parents will ask me this question, right? What was it, Grant? Like, what was it that finally made you change? I could get that question a lot because they want answers for their loved ones. They're like, what is it that I need to make happen for him, my person to get it, And And it's like, it's really impossible for me to tell you what it takes for another person. You know, I don't know what that thing is, what that moment is for another human being. I can't tell you that, but I can tell you for me, it was just this moment where, if you're really honest with yourself, you realize that you didn't really intend for your life to get this way. You didn't do this on purpose. Okay. And you realize that despite literally your best efforts, your best thinking, it's only continued to get worse, you know? And then you just have this moment. And for me, I was so stubborn. I was so stubborn that if I even felt like somebody else was trying to like nudge me to going to treatment or getting help or whatever, I wasn't going to do it. I just wasn't going to do it, you know? And I had to feel like it was my idea. It just had to feel like my idea. And so, yeah, that's where I was at. I didn't have another human being to give me $20, to get me a motel room, to give me nothing. Literally, that's where I was. And that's where I had to get, you know, and I had that moment and ended up basically hitchhiking out to Kerrville. And, you know, I'm leaving some stuff out. There's obviously some things that happened in there, but I did literally almost hitchhike to Kerrville. And that's where this sort of divine, you know, when you look back at moments in your life and you're like, dude, if I'd have just turned left instead of right, man, I wouldn't have met this person, or this wouldn't have happened. If I just wouldn't have been there that night, you know, it's just there's so many of those moments and you're just like I couldn't have orchestrated that, you know? And so,
Wow. Yeah, I love those. I love those stories and being able to look back and see all that. It all came together exactly how it was supposed to come together.
beautiful. It is
Wow.
beautiful.
Amazing. So go ahead.
Thank you.
I feel like everything you're saying, like I've had a lot of friends and even stuff that happened within myself that, man, I feel like you're saying there's a lot of stuff I left out, but I can kind of see those left out moments, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
been through it or had some real close friends go through it, you know what I mean? So like,
Right.
yeah, I know all those little details, you know, like, I mean, if you want to, you can write a book about this stuff, you know, and just go into the details, and you know. But I know this is a podcast, and you know, we try to keep it.
Well, you know, I mean, just it's more than that, though. You know, for me, I've realized that if you really want to, certainly there are times when the details are very important. You know, there are times when, but I've learned the hard way that you have to use your story like appropriately. You know what I mean? Like there's details you pull out when it's appropriate. You know, it's not about parading all the little details, all the war stories. It's not about all that, right? It's about it's not about you know glorifying all that. It's about, you know, certainly there are times when it's time to laugh and whatever, you know, I can bring that stuff up, but there's times when if I go too far into detail, I'll lose some people, you know, because then people are like, oh, I can't relate to that. Maybe I don't have a problem. I didn't go that far, you know, and so there are times when I have to think about that. It's like, you know, if I'm trying to make a big impact, right, and reach the most people, then it's important that I share the pieces of the story that are the most relatable, you know, the pieces that more people can identify with, you know. So
that's so true and very, I mean, I think that's like that should be, I don't know, a rule when it comes to communicating with others. Like you don't say all the details because you're definitely going to lose people. So that's so wise. Wow. So good advice. Good advice for all of us. Okay, so wow. And so you decided to go to Kerrville. And so wait, back up. You're from Houston?
Yeah, so Baytown specifically.
Oh, Baytown.
Uh-huh.
All right, because we're from Houston too.
Oh, right on. What part?
North Houston.
Yeah.
Okay, so
No, go ahead.
What'd you say?
Go ahead.
So you decided to go to Kerrville on your own. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was the only other place I knew anybody. I had been there once before, right, for treatment, and so this time I was on the run from the law. I'd committed another felony, and so they had putting a warrant out for my arrest, and so I went on the run. That's why I went.
Okay, wow. And so how much time had passed since you were there the first time?
So from the beginning of 2009 to 2014, so about 5 years. Yeah.
Okay, wow. Wow.
About 5 years.
And then from there, was that it? I mean,
yeah, that was it. I mean, I called the only other person I could think of there who I still knew, you know, me and him are still friends today. His name's Alex, and is the only other person I still had communication with there. And I was like, I called him. I said, man, I need to get out of Baytown. I got to get on the run. He said, man, I just got a little spot. I got a couch you can sleep on. If you can get up here, you can sleep here, you know? And so I got up there, and we had met in treatment. We had met in rehab the first time. So
wow.
you can imagine how it went down when I got there at first. For the first couple of weeks, we were ripping and running, and it was going down, you know? But again, I had that moment again, and we both did, right? Where it was like, matter of fact, it was two cute girls just randomly invited us to a meeting, an NA meeting. And we only went because it was two cute girls. That was it. Seriously. And so that's like, again, one of these moments, right? Well, guess who ended up being it? And I don't know if you know the structure of the 12-step, fellowships and sponsorship and all that, right? And sponsorship lineages and, stuff like that can be taken very seriously. And so there was a guy was at that meeting who also never really went to that meeting, who was my very first grand sponsor. So my sponsor's sponsor, and so the very first one I ever had. And I was just so blown away that he was there 5 years later, that I think he just, I don't know, it did something to me. It gave me a little like, oh, wow, how is this? This is not like, this can't be a coincidence, and
Yeah.
he took me to another meeting, ran into some more people, who I knew. And it was just sort of this moment I had where I said, wow, how has it taken me so long to get back here? Because I knew that point was going to come one day. Deep down, I always knew it. I joked about it. I said, one day I'm going to have to get help. I know that this is not going anywhere good. I just don't know when. I was trying to put it off. I don't want to do it now. And so that was it. After that, it wasn't him, but it was another guy who, again, just I literally credit this man for saving my life. The work that we did together. Yeah, it was a man who was, as we say, properly armed with the facts about himself. And he was able to phrase things and articulate things that those times when you have things in your head and then somebody else, like, you can't figure out how to quite get it out or articulate it. And then somebody else finally says it and you're like, yes, that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's it. I had so many of those moments with him, and he would phrase things and I would be like, yeah, yes, that's it. When you have enough of those, it's like, okay, this is obviously, I've got to follow this. I've got to go down this path. And I could not even express, man, I don't know where my life would be. I don't know where, because I committed another felony. I had a warrant out for my arrest the first 4 months I was there. And so the progression of that was I went to court for about a year. They actually, the court probationers, they did an evaluation on me and tried to recommend to the judge going to Safe P, which is, basically prison rehab, and I had a daughter on the way at this point. And the judge in Harris County, if you know anything about the court system there, this is just, what happened with me is just a 1 in a million chance that just doesn't happen in any other courtroom in this courthouse. But because any other time the judge automatically, they're going to go with that recommendation unless you have a great attorney, And even at that point, when you do those evaluations, you forfeit your right to negotiate. So he could have given me whatever he wanted to. And he said, why would I do that? Like, this young man's sober. He's got a child on the way, and he brought me up there and he gave me 2 years probation. I got off a year early, and he said, young man, I'm doing this because I feel like addiction is, because it was a theft charge. And he said, I feel like addiction is the actual issue here. And it seems like you got a handle on that. He said, but if it turns out you're just a thief and you end up back in my courtroom, I will send you back to the penitentiary, son. And I was just like, yes, sir.
Wow.
And I've communicated with him since, and I've let him know what's become of my life, because he gave me that chance. Because judges need to know that. They need to know that decision led to this.
Totally. Oh my gosh. So that brings us to, like, what is your mission right now in life?
That's it. That's what I'm doing right now. I am I'm still in pre-launch phase. I've really gotten heavily into the startup community. I got exposed to the startup world through another startup I was a part of, and it gave me just this inspiration because I've just gone through so much existential angst and trying to figure out what I really wanted, like what I wanted my life's work to be, and so really getting into this issue of second chance hiring, and And I don't mean second chance hiring where we're just trying to help people with criminal backgrounds just get any job, right? It's a much, much bigger than that, where this goes back to whenever I became the director of business development for family hospital systems here in North Austin. They actually had to get their legal department to rewrite their bylaws around criminal, history to even hire me. And so that kind of sparked this sort of proof of concept and this idea that, okay, wow, I got into healthcare, literally into healthcare with 3 felonies on my record. I couldn't have got a job as a janitor there before, right? And so there's this gap in between the people who have criminal backgrounds who are totally okay with working low level jobs and not having much upward trajectory. And then there's the people like, me who are entrepreneurial and can get into stuff like that and start their own business. That's great. If you can do that, great, do that, But then there's a gap in there, right? There's a whole gap in there full of people who don't want the low level jobs, but they don't really have the skill set nor the desire to start their own business. And they would just love a shot at a really great career opportunity with real upward trajectory opportunity. And when I say that, I literally mean to the C-suite, that's what I mean. And I know it's not that black and white, right? It's not that black and white. There's a lot of nuance there, but that's what we're trying to figure out now, right? Is putting together a cohort of resources to be able to make it consistently possible for what happened with me, instead of being this fluke thing that happens, that gets you on podcasts and stuff like that, right? Instead of that, it's this thing that is consistently possible, right? Consistently possible. And so I'd say the big heavy lifting right now is everybody has been focused on developing us, right? The people with criminal backgrounds, which is needed 100%. Tons of people doing that right now. And we're going to do that too. But what people aren't doing enough of is actually just asking the employers themselves, because it's all about risk mitigation, right? It's all about that right now. And so the heavy lifting is really, really doing the like digging and doing a lot of customer development interviews and finding out from employers, what is the risk, right? How can we mitigate this risk, right? How can we remove the risk from you? Because that's the problem. It doesn't matter how trained and developed you are, as long as there's a perceived risk in hiring you because of your background to the company, they're going to have a hard time hiring you over the person that doesn't have one, right? So how do we remove that? And so that's what we're figuring out right now. And that is, I cannot wait to get that launched, because I see what I'm overwhelmed, honestly. The more I look at the data and the more I look at what all we're going to have to do, the more I'm like, God, can I do this? But that, for me, you hear enough people say, all right, well, if you're not scared, you're not dreaming big enough. And so I'm like, okay, all right, I'm just going to go with that. I'm just going to go with that.
That's amazing. And you know what? Cisco and I have talked about this before, because he has a background that has kept him from having a job. I don't know if you want to speak about that.
I have. I got in some issues when I was when I was a teenager, like 18. Well, I was 17, but I got trialed as an adult. And then when I was like 24, I got in some other altercation with some people, and they threw the towel at me, like it was my fault. I was like, it wasn't even my fault, but I had an attorney and all that, but I have a record, so I have to deal with this. When I had a job, I've always worked for myself though, because of it, like I've been denied of jobs. So I totally understand what you're trying to do here, or where you're going at, because I've had to deal with those issues myself in my life. And when I first became a trainer in 2008, I remember getting a job at Bally's. Do you remember that place?
Oh, yeah.
But they had hired me. I'll just make this real quick. They hired me there, and I got my foot in the door because I wanted to learn the ropes. And I did 2 months. I was working there, and the guy who hired me, the trainer manager, I even put on the box, I've been arrested, blah, blah, blah. And he overlooked it. He just didn't, well, then the general manager came back 2 months later, and he was all like, hey man, what's this? He goes, I got to let you go, dude. He goes, you have a record, and, we can't have you working here. So I get totally what you're saying.
Wow.
So what I had to do, he goes, mean, I was doing my job. I did more than what, the average trainer was doing. Like
Exactly.
I was just doing what I was taught as a younger kid,
Right.
growing up. It's like how to, do you have a job? I have my dad who's a hardcore, blue collar working guy. He's always
Right.
giving 110% of everything he does. So I saw that growing up. So I just kind of took those things and went with it. But the manager said, I have to let you go, man. He goes, you can't work here with this record. And I was like, well, you got to do what you got to do. But he goes, since you've been doing such a good job and you do more than what any other trainer does here, like cleaning up, racking weights, and just saying hi to people, talking to people, helping people, instead of just standing there looking at, he goes, I need you to write me what exactly happened. And then I got to submit it to HR and see. And dude, I wrote that's why details and all that stuff would happen. I went into that. I wrote like a 3-page paper and I gave it to him. And he goes, all right, you can stay. And
Boom.
I stayed. I was there for 2 years and then I broke off and went solo. And I've been independent ever since. So, but I mean, I get exactly everything you're telling me because I've been through that. I never committed any violent crimes or beat anybody or anything. I just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
But it was meant for that to happen, so I can continue my entrepreneurial stuff and do what I need to do to be where I'm at today. But at the same time, I still struggle with some of those things, like when someone wants to hire me, like to work independently as a trainer for a company, I have to go through some of that still,
Yep.
even though I'm an independent contractor, like they want to know what kind of independent contractor they're hiring,
Absolutely.
So I totally
Absolutely.
get what you're talking about right now. This is definitely, I feel like you coming on and talking to us is just like giving me more, like I'm not the only one, people
Well,
like
that's exactly it.
yeah.
That's
There's a
exactly
lot.
it. You're right.
Yeah.
That you're everybody knows somebody. This is a huge problem. This is a huge, huge problem. It's one of those problems though that people don't care about until it happens to them or somebody they love.
Exactly. And you
That's
know
it.
what? I mean, I don't mean to say this in the wrong way, but like those people don't really care about like if it's us, they don't want to mess with us, or
Right.
if you have a record, they don't want to mess. Sorry, next,
Right.
like we'll hire that person who doesn't have the record,
Exactly. Exactly.
I get it, dude. It's a little chip on my shoulder, dude. I've been dealing with, I'm 47 now, but I've been dealing with it since I was 21 or 20.
Oh, man. See, that's the problem though. That's it. That's the issue. It doesn't matter what accolades you acquire. I have tried to, like, even when I had to go back to renting, I sold my house at one point, went back to renting. Oh, boom, suddenly my criminal record now applies again, right? And so literally I work with the sheriff of Williamson County. Sheriff Gleason's a good friend of mine, and I go into the jail. I work with Chief Makluta. I got letters from them. Like I would try to submit like, just anything I could to show like me speaking on stage, and still like people didn't care. It was like, whatever, don't care, uh, it was I was just like, oh my God, my I just, again, this chip on your shoulder where you're just like, all right, I don't want to like let
Yes.
it just make me react this way, but it's becomes
Yeah.
obvious that wow.
I feel like it's a constant trigger to put you into I'm a victim kind of situation, and you have to constantly pull yourself out of that. I'm not a victim. I do have control. There are some things I have control of, and you're doing something about that. Like you're taking control by helping so many people with this problem, that have to deal with this all the time. I don't want to say it's not their fault. It's not fair. It's not fair. I'm just gonna say
I definitely did break the law, and I definitely did deserve to go to prison and all those things. But the question is, hey, did you serve your time? Like, did you pay your debt to society or not?
Right. I mean, we can't be stuck in the past. Everybody moves on and grows, and there should be something to say about that and to show, we're not, if people that get out of prison can't do anything, then why are they even getting out of prison? Like it's just so backwards.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
I've had.
Go ahead.
I've had a couple, real close friends who, committed some serious crimes, and they were in prison for, 15 to 20 years. They spent
Yeah.
their whole half of their life in prison. But second chances do come, and if you, for every time you get denied, what I'm saying, there's gonna be someone out there with a heart or a
Right.
compassion or something to understand, because they had a family member that went through the same thing, or their own child went through it or something. So like,
Yeah.
someone will give you a second chance. You just got to take rejection as many times, and some people can't take rejection. And I know sometimes I go through that too. Like, I don't want to be rejected again and again. But like,
Right.
those are all the lessons you have to learn to,
Yeah.
process from that rejection,
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's so what, and aren't you going to go on a reality show soon about
I
this?
am, yeah. We put it off so that I've been in contact with the venture capital firm that's putting on the show. So I was going to go this next month, actually, June 11th through the 17th. Instead, I'm going to be going for the following season, which is only going to be filmed a month later, in July. And so yeah, I'm super excited about that. That's a crazy
Fun.
opportunity. Yeah.
That's so cool. And so that's just following your process with your business.
Yeah, so it's more of it's actually a competition. It's not like Shark Tank where they just come on and pitch and try to get, investment. It's an actual like week-long like, competition where they're very clear about it. It's not like they will film for entertainment value for the viewers, but it is our job to participate in the competition because we're competing with other startup founders. And this is everywhere from pre-launch phase to up to $2 million in revenue a year, and everything in between.
Wow.
And so I am stoked.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so exciting.
Where's
Yeah.
that going to take place at?
It's at they have a brand new facility next to a resort in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Before it was in Kansas City. We'll be going to Tulsa, and yeah. There's going to be just the people that are going to be there, the amount of learning and information I'll get to. Oh my gosh, it just that alone will be worth it.
Wow.
The experience,
It's called the Blocks. The Blocks. Beta Blocks is the name of the venture capital firm that puts it on. The Blocks is the name of the show.
Okay.
And do you know once after filming where it's going to come out on, or is it an online thing, or?
Not yet. No, so they're on season 7 and 8 is the next two that they're filming. So it's been on for a little while. I don't actually know where all they're streaming that at. I'll have to look it up and see. But yeah, I don't know when it'll actually air.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We won't keep you any longer. Our last question, what's something that keeps you, something you have to do on a daily basis to keep you emotionally balanced?
Oh, right now I'm going to go all the way back to prayer meditation, specifically meditation, and specifically mindfulness-based meditation. How do you pronounce it? Satipatthana. The discourse on mindfulness. I've been and out of pure necessity. I mean, it's not just like this trendy like I'm doing this because everybody's doing it. It's like literally with everything I've got going on, I have to find a way to get back right here because I have so much trouble with that, and I can't emphasize that enough. That has been an extremely valuable practice for me. So
Great.
yeah, huge.
And that's daily. You do that, once a day for sure, or twice a day, or.
Yeah, no, for a long time, I was very wishy-washy. I was very, because like for the beginning part of my recovery years, I got into a strict meditation routine. My life got busy. I sort of got out of it, right? I let it go, as a lot of us do, right? Your life gets full. You get all the things you asked for, then you stop doing the things you did to get them, right? And so now, because I got to a place where just the wishy-washiness wasn't working for me. As a matter of fact, I kept letting myself down. I would make these commitments. I'm not gonna miss. I'm gonna meditate, and then I would just make up reasons not to. And it's you like let yourself. You know what I mean? You just sort of let yourself down when you do that, right? That's not the connections I'm trying to make. And so, just when you've had enough, you've had enough. And one day I'm like, I don't care what time I have to wake up before my daughter wakes up or whatever. I am going to get up and I'm going to make sure I do this, because my days are always way, way better when I do, So yeah,
Totally.
definitely not.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I feel like we could talk to you about so many things, but we don't want to make it a 2-hour show.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I totally get it.
We'll have you back on. We would love to have you.
After you do the show, you can tell us about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
No, I appreciate you guys so much. So super grateful for having me on. It means a whole lot to me. So thank you guys.
We appreciate you, and what you're doing to help others is very needed.
Thank you.
Very much
Thank
so.
you.
Keep doing it, dude, because it'll all come back to you and be like, that was your mission.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Right.
All right, Grant. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Y'all too. See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.